You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome back to Horror Ramblings, your spooky source for all things horror. I am your host, Stephen White. Les has been on an adventure this week. He has been to Horror Hound, which is near I don't remember where exactly. Maybe it's Cleveland or somewhere in Ohio. That's all I can imagine. But it's got to be nearby because, you know, he'll take a trip, but not too far. He's not like me. It doesn't matter. So with me today is obviously my wife, Katrina.
Hello.
She is joining me again to fill in the gaps because she's a podcasting. She's not a newbie anymore. She's put in her time. She's like plowed through so many episodes of Inspired by a Weeaboo, which you should be listening to if you love anime, and even if you don't, maybe listen to it, and you never know what you might like. That's been one of the things that I've been trying to advocate for Inspired by a Weeaboo. I wasn't sure how I would feel about it. The season we're doing right now, Full Metal Alchemist, I'm loving it. I want to watch more of it. And the reason we haven't watched that much more of it is because we got to do podcasts about it. So something may change with that show because it's just been killing me. I want to watch some more of the show, So we'll figure that out as time goes on. But anyway, today I was racking my brain and we went through so many topics trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about. And the reason it was so difficult is I was trying to think of something that we could discuss, you and I, that we would have equal passion about, that we could talk about without having to rewatch something or kind of refresh our memory, something we feel like we have a passion for and we can remember well enough of what we want to talk about. Now, for me, that can be quite a few things. For you, on the other hand, since you are not as horror fluent as I am, there are various ones. Now, granted, we've talked about, we watched Megan together.
Yes.
But that, again, we'd watched that, then talked about it. Previous episodes, we talked about Child's Play together.
Yes.
Again, something you were familiar with.
Yes.
So, in essence, we are still kind of following that trend of things we talk about together.
Yes.
Because we're talking about killer dolls.
Yes.
And this time, we're talking about Puppet Master.
Yes.
Now, this is a franchise that is surprisingly still ongoing today, even though I feel like, in my opinion, the spin-off entries and stuff like that don't necessarily fit within my brain of where the timeline or the structure of Puppet Master has been playing out.
Yeah.
But it still exists. It's still out there. The characters are still kind of doing their movies. Other characters are getting their movies now. Like they just mentioned, I don't even know if I told you this or not. It's ridiculous when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're doing a Leech Woman spinoff. However, it is, I think they're calling her Furnace Leech Woman. So this is Leech Woman after she had been thrown in the furnace from part 2. And the continuation of her, I guess she survived, even though she looked like she was pretty crispy at the end of that moment. Or at least you would think so.
Why can't they just leave shit alone?
I don't know. But they're filming a lot of this in Ohio, believe it or not. in Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken. So
of course it's Ohio.
maybe I should tell Les to go up there and like audition so he can be in some full moon features. But I guess what I wanted to kind of explore with this, because this was one of the franchises I did want to explore with Les at one point. We got a list of things we want to talk about, but I felt like this would be good for you because you are a fan of the franchise. Now, you were introduced to that via myself,
Yes.
So what was it about the films that kind of grabbed your attention?
I like movies and stuff like that, obviously, where there are good people. Obviously, I do like, some horror movies and stuff. Like, I like Jason.
Mhm.
He's not good. He ain't ever going to be good. He's never going to do anything for good. But he's fun. But when it comes to dolls, I'm so torn because I can remember when I was younger watching one of the Goosebump shows or whatever, and it was
Yeah.
about the the puppet.
The
the
dummy doll or
yes,
whatever.
the
Yeah,
dummy
Night of
doll.
the Dummy or something like that. Yeah.
And it utterly fucking terrified me. Absolutely terrified me. I couldn't even look at those types of fucking dolls because it would just, oh my God, it'd make my anxiety go through the roof. But with Puppet Master, they're not evil. They get used for evil,
Sure.
but they are not inherently bad. They were all good, decent people at one point in time. And, they get put into the dolls and so on and so forth. So I guess it's just the whole idea behind it, especially with it being kind of like a big fuck you to Nazis and
Yeah.
Germany and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel like it has a good story. I absolutely love the dolls because they all have their own personalities and they all look so different. And I don't know, like it's something it's something I had never seen done before.
Right.
And it's something that I don't feel like we'll ever see again outside of the actual Puppet Master.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's not like, like the Annabelle movies and stuff like that. Never seen Annabelle. Don't want to see Annabelle. I don't do ghosts. But I don't know. It's just so different. And even though it's older, and even in the new ones, they still stick with that like stop motion style movements and everything for the puppets. So I feel like it's something different. It's so different than everything else. Like, I guess that's the biggest thing about it, is it's not like other stories.
Right. Now, we'll probably bounce around from movie to movie as we kind of talk about this, because there are a lot of aspects I do want to kind of talk about and discuss with it, because especially when you look at the original film. Now, this was, to my understanding, I don't think it ever went to theaters. If it did, it was a very limited run, but this is a straight to video. Full Moon has always been a very independent production company. It started by Charles Band, and he had done various other production companies prior to that, like Empire was another one that he did, and he had an idea under the Empire label called Dolls, which was similar in some aspects, but I won't say that it's the same concept.
Yeah.
But there are similar ideas. So you can kind of see that Charles Band likes the idea of killer dolls in some aspect. But even in Dolls, I feel like there were some sympathetic attributes to the dolls, the killer dolls. So it's like he just kind of went up that with Puppet Master, kind of narrowed it down so it wasn't just like a cavalcade of dolls. It was just, okay, so we're taking puppets, and what is their story? And what is the baseline of it? And I agree with you. The premise, as you see it, is presented as Andre Toulon was being hunted by the Nazis. He was, I don't remember how they specified why they were looking for him, other than the secrets. But I feel like there was an actual label, because he wasn't a war criminal, but I guess to them in some aspects he could be considered as such.
Yeah.
But he's a man who fled from Nazi Germany. He was trying to hide, trying to get away from everything. Now in the first film, we didn't really know about all this. Spoilers, by the way, if you've never seen these, just so you're aware. But we didn't know about his wife. We didn't know about all of his history. So when we first meet Andre Toulon, he's just a guy who, you see, he cares for his puppets. He's trying to protect them because he knows he's being hunted. And as opposed to giving up his secret or being put into a position where he might accidentally give it up, he decides to take his own life and just say the hell with it. which is sad.
Yes.
And it's even sadder when you put all the extra context behind it, because this is a fighter. He could have fought them, or at least his puppets could have, or at least that's what we're inclined to believe at this point. And it kind of makes you wonder why he chose that path at that point in time.
Yeah.
Like, what was it about in that moment? He was just like, God damn it, I can't do this anymore. Like, I've tried to get away. I've tried to run, and they're still going to find me.
Well, if we think of how long he had been running at that point as well.
Yeah, because Puppet Master 3 is where we really get a deep history on Toulon, and that was 1941, I think. I probably could look it up, but I don't have, like, I don't want to look it up. It's in the height of World War II, Nazi Germany. They're trying to take, when they learn of what the puppets are or what they're capable of, they know that Andre Toulon has a secret, and they want to try to learn that. They want to try to exploit that. And a lot of what actually goes on there, which I kind of find fascinating, becomes the centerpiece for a lot of the spinoffs, because that's where they did the Axis of Evil trilogy and tried to expand on that point in time, I guess. So there were other characters involved, and you see these Nazi regimes more, I guess, kind of off on their own way, doing their own thing. I even know that I'm almost positive they even worked in one of the characters from Part 3, who was the scientist, who was more fascinated by it than power mad, like the one guy whose name I can't remember, but he looked like Blade. Freaky. I mean, that was another thing that we learned in Part 3, is that all the puppets, as you kind of mentioned, were at one point a real person.
Yes.
So it was almost like a tribute to that person was made, and I guess some essence of them was put into it. Now, Blade, on the other hand, was almost used as like a tool to mirror the bad guy. And thinking about that, how weird that is that he looked, it wasn't just the outfit. I'm talking like facial features and everything. And that's no offense to the man either, but it's uncanny.
Yeah.
How much you look at him and you're like, holy shit, he's kind of like Blade.
Yeah, it's almost like Blade is his shadow running him down.
So in that way, it's kind of like Toulon says, I think, in the scene, where it's like, it's almost like looking into a mirror, and then it's watching you be killed by your own shadow in some essence. So, but it was in that movie that they really established. And again, I think even in Part 1, we kind of get a sense that they're not inherently bad.
Yeah.
It's more who's targeting them to do bad.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. Like, they get used for bad things, but they're not, like, if they were just left to their own devices, not threatened, they're not going to fuck with you.
Sure.
They're just going to ignore you or act like you don't exist unless you invade their space and try to do something to them, or, just shit hits the fan.
Yeah. Like, Part 2 is the biggest anomaly out of the entire series for me, because I honestly feel like they didn't know what they wanted to do with the characters.
Yeah.
Because, again, essentially they were evil in Part 1 because they were killing the people who were inhabiting the hotel. But when we kind of spin it back around toward the end, we realized the guy who was manipulating this whole facade had been he was essentially the puppet master.
Yes.
As the term implies. So he was targeting all these people. He was pointing them in that direction, and they just did that. But then when he acted against one of their own, because I think he attacked Jester.
Yeah, he hit Jester.
Then they were just like, oh, fuck you. And then they turned on him. So that shows that they, even though they kind of do follow a master, they do act on their own accord when threatened within the group, which I also found fascinating as well.
Like, I feel like, especially when you see how the puppets interact and stuff like that, again, like in Part 3, that they have at least some form of a human soul inside of them, or at least the majority of them do. And obviously, Leech Woman, she comes around in that one as far as you actually see her, like, how the process works.
Sure.
I guess is the way I'm trying to say it. But it's not like, even though Toulon's wife's soul was in Leech Woman, it's not like she acted like she did when she was alive.
Sure.
It's like almost like an echo of who they were. So I feel like that's one of the reasons why they can get, I guess you could consider it like manipulated by a quote unquote puppet master. And that's probably why Toulon killed himself and hid them away, because he realized he created a weapon that could be used for bad. It's not like they're only going to follow him. We know for a fact they do not just follow Toulon's orders. They'll follow anybody who basically holds their lives in the balance, which you find out more about that because of the syringe and the liquid and all that crap. But it's like they're not stupid, but they also don't seem to be able to communicate like a normal person would be able to communicate, or even like an infant.
Sure. I mean, obviously they're not speech prone, or at least most of them aren't. Now, Decapitron would be a slight adjustment to that rule, but there's reasons for that we'll get into eventually.
Count.
Yeah, because I mean, it kind of goes into some kind of spiritual thing or whatever, and I'm not
like,
100% on that.
They make noises for people who haven't seen it. Like, they do make noises. Jester kind of like has his own little laugh, but it's not like a ha 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 laugh. It's kind of like a muffled giggle almost. And they have like their and like they and
Grunts
stuff like that. Yeah. And there are some characters who can communicate with them. Like Toulon could communicate with them and seem to understand what they were wanting, what they were asking, type thing. And then, what is it? Is it in the first or second one? The younger man?
Oh, Rick, that was in part 4.
Oh, part 4. Wow, I was way off. But he's also able to kind of communicate with them in his own way.
Yeah.
So it's weird because they're not quite puppets, but they're not quite higher intelligent either.
Sure.
Like they are, but they aren't.
Yeah, like they're limited in what they can do and how they can communicate, because obviously but I mean that's a fair assumption though, because they're still puppets. They're mechanical. They have a life serum, if you will, that kind of animates their bodies, but beyond that they're not able, because they don't have the means to do so. Now, how they grunt and whatnot, that's up to you, but they cannot vocalize anything.
And see, even just like outside of the kind of vocalization, like you can see how smart they are in like the traps and the way that they stalk people. Like they are tiny little killing machines, but they just get bamboozled by shit.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a child. And I feel like besides Jester, the biggest one that you kind of get kid vibes from would be Pinhead.
Yeah.
Like he's physically hugged, people before. Like he just comes off like a big softie, but he'll also fuck your world up too.
Because he's got them big ass hands. But I want to, like we mentioned 4, and that's definitely one I want to talk about, but I want to come back to 2 for a second because I touched on it, is being the anomaly, because in that one, the idea or the concept behind it is that the puppets revive Toulon to bring him back so they can have him make more serum, because they were starting to lose. I guess they didn't have much more left, and if without the serum, they can't survive.
Yeah.
So it was like a desperate attempt on their part. It's like, well, shit, we got to do something. And it's such an odd thing because Toulon is now the bad guy, and he was never, in no other film does he come off as the bad guy. Now,
other than the new remake that they did.
Well, we'll get to that one. I ain't going to touch on that one just yet. We'll get to that one. But in that film, he comes off like he's driven mad. He's insane. And while you can kind of blame that on the serum, or at least the way they brought him back, it's still just such an out of character element to put into place. And granted, this is only the second chapter, so I get it. So if it was later on down the line and this happened, maybe they could flesh it out more. But with this being the only time that he really is the bad guy, it sets a bad precedent for what we saw in the first one. And then when we revert back to, oh, he's good too long in part 3, I don't know. It's an oddity.
I mean, like, I understand what you're saying with the second one. I feel like if they would have done it to where he kind of gradually got worse, then that would make more sense. Because to me, it kind of makes me think of, completely off topic of Puppet Master, but Ra's al Ghul and the Lazarus Pit. You know, yes, he might have been murderous and shit like that, but they had proven that the Lazarus Pit, each time he went into it, each time he had to revive, make himself younger, whatever, his mind, it eroded his mind.
Sure.
And he's not the first person it's done it to. So, and that's how we got, what's his face? Red Hood?
And the Red Hood,
yeah.
We're talking about Batman, by the way, just so you're aware.
Sorry, but it makes sense in the sense of he was dead. He had been dead for a very long time, and they brought him back. So there's no telling, especially if you want to try adding in the whole, you know, whether or not a whole heaven and hell existed in their world. There's no telling what fucked up his mind between point A and point B.
Yeah.
Because if you think of it, if, you know, Toulon, which I would honestly believe would go to heaven if it existed, being ripped from that and back into a body in this hellish landscape that you left on your own terms, and now you're just pulled back. So there's no telling what kind of warping it would have done to his mind. So that I can understand. Didn't like it because I don't like the fact that they literally took a Jewish survivor and made him into a bad person.
Sure. Now, again, this was pre-part 3, before we went back in time to really get a further history. So, in essence, it paints an interesting picture if you only have part 1 to go off of, because when you see him in part 1, beautifully played by William Hickey, who I've got to give a shout out to because I love that man so much and I miss him so much. But he just played him as a, you know, you saw he cared. You saw like this love he had, just picking up Jester and putting him into the case. And
it was a very like, what's his face in Pinocchio?
Geppetto. So you saw the sweetness. So that's why even with that context, it's still jarring.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because it always kind of set wrong with me when I would watch it, because even the way it ended was just the most bizarre fucking ending that never paid off anywhere. Where it was like somebody, because he created like life-size puppets that they were going to put their souls into, and I think he actually did. And then there was another one, but we never 100% got confirmation who went into the other puppet, and then they were driving up down the California coast, and then that's just where they left it. It's like, what is this? So I think they didn't even know where they were going with it.
It was a filler episode.
Filler episode, sure. Which there are quite a few in Puppet Master, don't get me wrong. So 3, 4, and 5 to me are the trilogy, if you will, a proper trilogy, because all the threads connect for a lot of reasons. Now, we get Toulon's backstory in part 3. We really get to see, like, who was he? Which
I love the man who played Toulon in that movie.
Guy Rolfe.
He is absolutely fucking adorable, and I absolutely love him.
Guy Rolfe, he brought pathos, compassion, everything you wanted from this man. You wanted him to succeed.
Oh, yes. You wanted him to make it out. You wanted him and his wife to live happily ever after, for his puppets to be safe. Like, you felt his anguish. You felt his, like, every emotion that man had, you felt it right along with him.
Yeah. There was no antagonist vibe coming from him.
No.
He was not the bad guy.
No.
Period.
He was just trying to keep his friends and family safe.
And then he saw injustices happening and he tried to do what he could.
Yes.
But at some point it was just like, puppets, have at it. And that's where his vengeance came from. And never once do you feel like he stepped over a boundary. It's just like, no, dude, I am with you 100%.
Yeah.
Have at it, and you root for him. Mm-hmm. And then they start, or where it ends is we see that he's traveling around, or we are under the assumption, given the time frame, he will eventually make it to where we found him in part 1.
Yes.
Which I can't remember what year that was. I know they probably said it at the beginning, but I can't remember. It's probably the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken, but it's neither here nor there. But from there, then we go to part 4. Now, they even kind of positioned the idea at the end of part 3, coming soon, Puppet Master 4, when bad puppets go good. Yeah. And you're just like, okay.
Which again, they weren't really bad.
Yeah, but I think in some aspects you're just like, you perceive them as bad because they killed good people. But again, I'm with you. I'm with you. They are being directed to do these things as puppets would.
Yes.
That's why you have a puppet master. Even in part 2, where they are killing innocent people, they are being directed by Toulon, who has gone mad,
yes,
to do this. So therefore, I wouldn't consider them necessarily bad.
No, the puppet, depending on who the puppet master is, because there has part 4, a good puppet master, but depending on who the puppet master is the evil one.
Yeah.
At no point in time can you say that the puppets are evil because they're not acting of their own volition. So they are being coerced, they are being just fucked with.
Yeah.
Whether it is them being threatened or them being physically harmed, because yes, they are deadly, but they are also still puppets. They can be broken, which they have shown.
Well, clearly in part 2, that almost seemed like it was the end of Tunneler, because he got smashed in that film, and then they actually had him on a table kind of dressed out like he was being worked upon and taken apart. But then somehow we see him alive and well in part 4, which you can either take as they just said, to hell with part 2, it never happened, or maybe the puppets found him, picked him up, and put him back together, and then that's that, because they're still in the hotel.
Yeah.
That was the other part of it that makes part 2 an anomaly, is it almost seemed like they left the hotel, but then now we're right back in the hotel, trunk, puppets, everybody's still there. So I don't know what to say about part 2.
It's a filler episode.
It's a filler, and it goes nowhere. It makes no sense. But it had to exist in some form or fashion, because that was where Torch was born. And then we see Torch is still with the crew. I don't think he was actually visible in part 4, but he did come around in part 5, and they're essentially back to back the same movie.
Yeah.
Which, whatever Charles Band was thinking of at the time, sure, whatever. But I honestly feel like 4 and 5, even though they are 2 of my favorites, they could have combined them into one film. Because I feel like there's filler in both, like little elements that just kind of like, if you cut this and you cut that and you smash this together and put this back in there, like you could make it 1 2-hour, maybe slightly over 2-hour movie, as opposed to 2 90-minute movies that make 1 3-hour epic. But there's some long editing in that. And as a teenager, when I saw them, because I mean, when I first saw these films, like, I got hooked. And when the video store, I tried to keep track of when the movies were coming out. Now, granted, this was before internet, so I had no idea, but I would get hints out of magazines that I would read or anything like that. So I would try to hang on to little nuggets. And I would go to the local video store, which, funny enough, for me, was actually right across the street from my high school. So when I was of a certain age, I would just march directly out from school straight over to the video store and see what was on the shelf. and then I would drive home.
Talking about the one over on the square, the little one.
Well, it's not the square anymore. Not in Gornsville.
Oh, you're talking about Gornsville?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Carthage. Oh,
No.
yeah, you went to Gornsville.
I went to
School,
Gornsville.
that's
Yep.
right.
Y'all don't know these towns, and if you do, hey, good look at you. But yeah, I would go right over there, and the video store owner of Town and Country Video, which I'm pretty sure that's the one that was, he would always keep, the Full Moon titles in stock. And since Full Moon was such a brand of its own, and they would always promote all their other projects at the end of every movie where they have their video zone section, I was always up to date, and I was always trying to keep track of what was coming out. So Puppet Master 4, as soon as I saw that, snatched it up, and I took it home. And of course, when I got to the end of it, I was like, shit, there's got to be more to this. There's got to be a 5. And I kept my eyes open. And then as soon as I saw it, snatched it up. I was home. And I was excited because the promise at some point, part 4 was supposed to be, and this still pisses me off to this day, even though I like it, part 4 was promoted on a different video zone on a different movie, and I cannot remember for the life of me which one it was, but it was supposed to be Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys. That was the concept. I saw a poster, saw everything, and I thought, holy shit, yes! Because I love Demonic Toys as well. So I was excited about that prospect. Then somehow that morphed into Doll Man versus Demonic Toys, which I was like, okay, maybe they'll get to that other later. Fair enough. And that's another one I would love to talk about, but we won't because that's a different topic. But yeah, I felt like I got gypped out of Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys because that to me felt like, yes, that's what we needed. And then we got some sci-fi original movie garbage, which if you're a fan of this series, do not watch that because it will do nothing but piss you off.
If you're a fan of which series, Demonic Toys or Puppet Master?
Both. Because you get inferior versions of the puppets and you get a movie that essentially amounts to a small little fight at the end. One of those versus movies. Not one of those movies where you actually get a fight throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Or several little fights throughout the movie. No, it's just like one little clash at the end. And it's just like, why would you bash these together just for one quick little tussle at the end of a movie? Doll Man versus Demonic Toys, he fought every single one, throughout the entire movie. So therefore, he did fight them.
Yeah.
Maybe not all at once, but he fought them singularly throughout the entire film. So therefore, it lived up to its name.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly wondering if they just could not figure out the proper story beats, because I feel like they had an idea, because with part 4, they do hinge on a demon, Sutek. And Sutek apparently knows or is aware of the magic in which the serum holds.
Yeah.
So he wants to get that back. He wants to take it from Toulon, even though he's dead, but he wants to make sure that secret is hidden away and it's taken from, which, I mean, who's going to do, like, there's part of that just doesn't add up. It's like, whoa, all this time and now you're just coming for it. It's just, I don't know. Something about it's a little off.
Yeah, especially considering, didn't that, at the beginning of that movie or towards the beginning of it, when they find the puppets, they have to wake them up.
Yeah. They find the trunk.
At any point in time, this bitch could have came in and grabbed that fucking shit and he wouldn't have had to have fucked with the puppets at all.
Right. So there's a few plot holes to be fair, but I like the film because they put the puppets in a situation that we had not seen. They're not just randomly killing folk. They are protecting. They are fighting.
Yes.
And we actually get to see scenes of them working on their own, isolated from humans, dealing with other evil puppets. And for whatever reason, I don't know, they're just action sequences. There's no dialogue or anything like that. But it's those little moments where you see them kind of communicating with one another or
Yeah.
interacting with one another. So you get that camaraderie, you get that sense of unity that they have for
Yeah.
one another. And
Like they're a family.
yeah, so
Hands down.
we get to see that in its essence. And I think that's what I love so much about it is because of those scenes like that, where you get to see them doing what they do on their own because they see a threat and they're just like, hey, we got to go take care of this. And then even just like little moments where they have, I think there was this one, of course, this might've been part 5, where one jumps up to the ceiling. And if I keep hitting the microphone, I apologize. But one jumps up to the ceiling and they just kind of look up like, holy shit. Like they're just freaking out like, okay. Like they didn't know what to do about it. And it's just little moments like that that I loved in both 4 and 5, which again, like I said, they're essentially the same damn movie. If you ask me, they just continue on, but it's those moments that I love so much about those movies. And that's why I think I have a fondness for them over some of the others because of that one little aspect.
I'd definitely say, I would definitely say 3 is probably my all-time favorite, and definitely 4 and 5 would be the next 2.
Yeah. And again, that also kind of carries a thread because where we have Decapitron kind of, what would be the best way to say this? Kind of, Toulon uses Decapitron to communicate with Rick.
Which is a really weird sequence because they could have just kept it to where, because Decapitron's face is, it's human-esque, but it kind of looks like a skull dipped in silver.
Yeah. Or just
to a point. Like, not super pronounced features on the skull, but, you see where the eyes are, you see where the nose is, you see where the mouth should be, but it's very robotic. And then when they do the scene where Toulon is talking to him, it's like they fucking Wizard of Oz'd his head onto Decapitron's fucking body.
It's only that shot too. It's that off-putting shot where they have to stick his head on the puppet's body, and it's just like
you could have just had that man's voice,
or just
I feel like everybody would have known his fucking voice.
Yeah,
and you could have just done that. Or, as he was speaking, just have like them look at a picture or something. So you were like, oh, okay, that's Toulon's voice if you didn't know it. But is it not the same fucking actor?
Yeah, it's
from
the same guy.
3? Yeah. So you should know it. They didn't have to fucking, ghostify his little head on top of fucking Decapitron.
They even did a close-up shot. Like a close-up shot where you didn't see it and you saw he was wearing the jacket and everything. So it was just like, just do that. Don't cut. Just keep the close-up, please, for the love of God. Because he looks so weird. And his little puppet and his little head. And it's just like, man, it's weird.
It's so bad.
But again, we're talking about straight-to-video budget. They didn't have a lot to work with, which... Even in saying that, now I do we haven't talked about this, but I do want to talk about this because this is something that I feel like declined in quality a lot as the movies progress, which should not be the case. But I also feel like that's a death of the craft, not so much anything else, but the stop motion animation. I think David Allen Productions are the ones who were responsible initially, and I don't know who did it down the line, but they were like craftsmen of stop motion, and they really, you could tell they had a passion for it. They weren't out to cheap out and cut corners. They really put a lot of effort into it. Now granted, sometimes those scenes can be jarring compared to other things, but the fluidity of the motion, the way everything kind of moves and reacts, like even just little things like that. I remember there was a shot, and I think it was in part 5 as well, where the one demon puppet walks through a wall and Pinhead goes over and starts banging on the wall like he was trying to follow it.
Yeah.
And he just does a step back. And just how his movement is stepping back. The pose, everything about it. It's just so precise. It's so particular.
Yeah.
And they could have just cheaped out and done like a very piss poor job.
Yeah.
But they put little details, little efforts. And I think that also adds to their personality when you see those movements and just adds more to their character that just makes me love it even more.
Yeah.
You know, so even little moments like that, like 6-shooter, going bang, bang, and just flipping his guns and everything. It's so good.
Yeah.
Like you just see all because it's the little details, the twirling of the guns, and he's got 6 arms and each one's going at it. I want to see more of that because those just make those scenes even better. And I feel like they've gotten away from that in some of the later entries, which is a shame because those are the moments in a lot of the earlier films that just made it for me.
Yeah.
That really, really sold it.
I mean, even down to where, because I don't remember which one it is, but I know obviously there's several where you actually see the puppets, walking. There's a lot of scenes where it's kind of cut off so you don't see the full puppet and all that. But I know there's a scene where you see Jester walking. And I wouldn't say his movement is like as fluid as like 6-shooters, but he walks like you would imagine a living puppet would walk.
Right.
Like it's like they literally took the marionette version of him and walked him across the fucking screen.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was kind of cool because it's stop motion. So it's like hundreds of shots just to create a very small amount of time. But when you're watching it, it's like they literally could have taken a marionette and just walked it in front of the camera and shot it. But they didn't.
And it's really impressive. Now, I'll even say this as a side. I have dabbled in stop motion before, and let me tell you, like I did the cut corners bullshit where like I wasn't trying to. I just thought, well, if I just move this click, and just had enough, I thought, well, that'll look good. It does not. There's got to be 100 more shots in there that I just did not take. So that's on me. So props to those people who did that. And I hate that they're not, because again, I think the art form is dying.
It is.
Because we don't see it. The people over at, I think it's called Lakia, the ones who did the Box Trolls and Paranorman and Coraline, like they're keeping it alive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I doubt they were the ones whoever did Pinocchio, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Yeah.
That's a return to that form. And I want to see more of that because it's such a great, phenomenal art style. I mean, not everything needs to be stop motion. I mean, don't get me wrong, but when you can utilize it, utilize it.
It works really well for certain things.
Yeah.
Like going even back to like Nightmare Before Christmas, I cannot imagine that storyline done in any other freaking art form versus the stop motion animation with, the claymation.
Yeah.
And same with Coraline and Corpse Bride. Like all these freaking movies, it just like that is what made them good. Because I don't feel like you could have done that in any other art form and gotten just that gritty and almost terrifying in some aspects of those three. Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, and Caroline. They have absolutely terrifying scenes in them. And I feel like it translates so much more realistically, as weird as that sounds, through the claymation versus if it was like an animated art form.
But I can 100% see that. And the fact that I understand it's a very expensive process.
Oh, yeah.
And it's no doubt one of the reasons that, it's becoming a dying art, but there's something to it. Very much like you said about claymation. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it here, but California Raisins, Will Vinton, his whole career of claymation. I mean, he is the father of claymation. That's his term. And the detail that they put into it versus what they do with computer generated stuff today, you don't see that care put into, not all, I won't say all, but there's simplicity to it that they seem like that they've kind of, polished certain things where it's like, well, we don't have to do this or that. Whereas you look at something in claymation
Mm-hmm.
or stop motion animation, and it's just the littlest detail, and it makes all the difference.
It's like those old art forms that people took for granted for so long. Like claymation, the way that they did the original Disney movies where they painted like on glass, like Bambi is the big one that I know. They painted each scene on glass, and then that's like when you're going through in the beginning of Bambi and it's going through the woods and everything, and it looks like you're moving through the woods and you see the trees passing by. It's literally just them sliding a piece of painted glass in front of the camera, and you would never know if it wasn't for the behind the scenes of that freaking movie. And so like that art form, the claymation art form, and then there's one other I was literally thinking about while you were talking, and it completely like foofed out of my freaking mind. But there's another art form that is also one of those. It so much more work goes into it. And that's nothing against people who do the computer animation or anything like that, but you have those instances where everything in the foreground is going to be your most detailed. Everything in the background is basically like a 2-year-old's watercolor painting. It all just kind of melds together. But with claymation, everything, the buildings, you have to make those from scratch. These things are going to be destroyed. There's a lot of things that do kind of get destroyed. Same with like stop motion type animations and all that kind of crap. There's going to be things that are getting destroyed, so you have to make so many of them. I don't even remember how many heads that they said that they had, but for Nightmare Before Christmas, they had so many different heads of Jack Skellington, and it was just for each tiny micro expression leading up to like his big frown or his big smile or the big like, oh, type face. And they had to have like every one of them's hand sculpted. And it's just an amazing art form. And even animation, like Toy Story. I remember, we had obviously watched Toy Story when they first came out and everything. But then when the 4K versions came out and we got them, like you could see the tiny little nicks in the wood. You could see the little scuff marks on the floor, things that you didn't even pay attention to, but they went back and they enhanced that. And it's just on a whole nother level. It makes a whole different type of movie. And I feel like that's one of the things with Puppet Master. You don't have movies like that. It's a whole different type of movie than all of your other stuff.
Right.
Because like Chucky, he was a puppet. That was the other art form that's dying. Freaking Jim Henson. The whole puppet. Yes, puppeteering in itself. He made massive fucking puppets that the eyes blinked, the mouth moved, everything. And his art form has been dying since he died. His son's doing his best to keep it alive, but people just aren't into it anymore. And it's sad because they did such amazing things with that art form. The movie The Labyrinth would not be as awesome if everything in it was CG instead of puppets.
Yeah. And I know I've mentioned, I don't know if I've thought this, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on a pod or anything like that before, but just the idea of using CG to just enhance what's already there. Can you imagine? Now, I personally would not want them to do it now, but if somebody said, hey, we're going to do this, I don't think I'd be opposed to it necessarily. But take using Jim Henson as a great example. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original movie from 1990.
Yeah.
If you go back and you just take CG and you just enhance little tweaks to these suits, make little adjustments to where maybe you could see a zipper or a little crease or something like that, and you just smooth that shit out and you just enhance what's already there, because those puppets were superb.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Everything about them, superb. So all you're doing is you're just going back and you're just kind of cleaning it up. I mean, goddamn. I mean, and that's the same with this stuff here too. I mean, you could do that if you wanted, but at the same time, I mean, the art form is perfect as is. It may not always translate perfectly when you're transitioning from scene to scene, but it still works. there's a reason King Kong was so popular back in the day, because Willis O'Brien created this amazing stop motion figurine and made it look real. And no one had ever seen that. And then Ray Harryhausen went beyond that and just created movie after movie with these stop motion creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And that used to be our CG.
Yeah.
and now we've gotten, and I don't want to knock it, because we've seen impressive stuff with CG.
Oh, yes.
Don't get me wrong.
Planet of the Apes is probably, like, Avatar used to be one of the all-time, in my book, ranking movies for CG. It looks so fucking real. We went and saw it in 3D, and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
It was the best 3D movie I had ever seen in my entire freaking life. And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the whole new format for 3D. But everything looks so realistic. Like, you could reach through that screen and touch it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Planet of the Apes is probably the #1 fucking movie that has the best CGI, and I will die on that hill.
And she's talking about the Rise, War.
Yes, not the OG
Dawn.
Planet of the Apes,
Or
because
Rise, Dawn, and War.
yeah, I'm talking about the newer ones where all the apes are CG'd. That man who plays Caesar,
Andy Serkis.
yes, he is amazing.
Yeah.
And I know he also played Smeagol or whatever his name is in Gollum. Yes. Well, his actual name is Smeagol. But yes, he also played Gollum. Like, his soul comes through
Yeah.
so much, especially in Planet of the Apes with his eyes. Like, his soul comes so through, and like, you would believe that this was a fucking talking ape.
And that's one of the biggest criticisms that I've always heard, especially in video games, is characters have dead eyes.
Yeah.
And I feel like they've been working on that, and they're trying to get there to kind of alleviate that problem, but it's still present. And I still feel like they've got a ways to go. Now, I know we're getting way off topic of Puppet Master, but this is all kind of within the realm of it, so hang on. We'll get back to it. But there was a new demo for the Unreal Engine 5, and they were showcasing lighting, structure, facial features on a human person. And it's impressive. It's impressive. As long as they don't talk, it's impressive. And I noticed that's the last vestige that they have to conquer, is the moment they start talking, you can see it.
And that's so sad. And I know that video game companies, they're not getting the funding like all these big Hollywood movies and stuff like that.
Of
but
course, they make enough bank.
yeah,
That's another show. Go listen to Superman Crash.
But like with Planet of the Apes, when Caesar talks, his mouth moves like how you would assume an ape who could speak English's mouth would move.
Yeah.
And going back to one of my favorite characters from the movie is Koba. Like, I want a dog to name him Koba. I fucking love Koba, even though, he wasn't the best. But anyway, when he says his name for like the first real time and he says Koba, like the way his mouth moves, you see that when chimpanzees are, doing different type of inflections and stuff like that in real life, when they move a certain way or they open their mouth and move it a certain way, especially doing like the ooh, ooh type thing. They did that so realistic that it looks like a real fucking chimpanzee. And it's mind-boggling that they could do this. And then you turn around and you get other movies that have CGI and it just doesn't look as good.
Yeah.
And like, again, I know not everybody gets that funding. Like,
sure,
people shitted on She-Hulk for not looking as good as Hulk in the movies, even though that's a TV show versus a damn movie. But regardless, she still looked freaking good. But backtrack several years to the fucking live action Garfield movie or the live action Scooby-Doo movies. They just, like, even the actors acting with them, it's like they're looking through them.
Yeah.
And we talked about something like this the other day about how it's like, I'm sure it's hard to try to act towards something, but they've shown actors can do it in other freaking movies. They did it in every damn one of those Planet of the Apes movies, and they sold it. And maybe it's because they had somebody to look at because he was there in the suit and everything else. But like, even when it comes down to just like the interactions with Scooby-Doo and Garfield, specifically the petting, like petting Scooby-Doo, it doesn't look like you're petting a fucking dog. It looks like you're waving your hand through the air at a, diagonal slant. Same with Garfield. It's like, it just doesn't look realistic, and they didn't do it where it needed to be. And I know that everything wasn't as nice as it is now. Like, the CGI wasn't as good as it is now. But coming back to Puppet Master, that's at least one thing, even though their movements have kind of downgraded, I don't feel like they have bastardized it in the way that they could have.
Sure. I mean, now, passing by part 5 into the darker side of Puppet Master in my mind, and I don't want to disparage, okay, because some may like some of these movies past 5 more than others. I am not in that majority. I personally feel like the first 5 are the most solid entries, with a smattering here and there. So part 6 was the biggest disappointment for me personally, because the way 5 ended, it felt like, okay, well, we're going to continue to see the adventures of Rick and everything. And they even said that Puppet Master is going to spin off and we're going to have Puppet Wars. That was another one of those things they promised that never happened. So I was like, okay, Puppet Wars, cool. That sounds intriguing. And then we get Curse of Puppet Master, which I have no idea how it fits in. You talk about filler episode, this is it. Because suddenly they're off on their own. They are found by characters we've never heard of, have this off adventure, and it's all about this kid being turned into a puppet. And then the way it ends is just so abrupt. It's just like, what the fuck was that? For 80, 90 minutes, I have no idea. It was such a disappointment because I was like, how did we get here? How did we get here? I have no idea. And then from there, I think that's when we did Retro Puppet Master, which was a cool concept. Okay. Don't get me wrong. I thought this was a great concept in theory. Execution, maybe not so much. Because this is also when they seemed like they were dropping their budgets and trying to cut corners where they could, which is really a shame. But it was like, well, what if Toulon had created other puppets prior to the ones we were familiar with? And they even posited that at the beginning of the movie as Toulon, bringing back Guy Rolfe, which was always amazing. Getting to see, I think he and Blade were sitting on a train together. So we could say, okay, well, this kind of fits in from where he leaves from part 3. So he's on the train. And he finds one of the puppet heads and is like, kind of pointing at it. He's like, oh, yeah, let me tell you that story. And he tells the story about how he got the formula, how he kind of had these other puppets before, which my only beef with that is I wish they would have created a few more original puppets, because there were a few new ideas there, but then they had some retro versions of the ones we were familiar with. Now, to me, that negates what we kind of laid into place in part 3 about who these people were, versus why not just create like a whole new set of puppets, just something completely different that fit with the times. Because we had at least one, and that was Dr. Death, which, I mean, that was a neat little design. So why not do more of that? Why did we have to have retro versions of what we already have? We don't need that. So I wish they'd have kind of done that. The movie moves at a snail's pace, and it's really hard to watch. It's even got one of the guys from that movie, The Room, whose name I can't remember because I don't really give a damn. It's not Tommy Wiseau, I know that much. It's the other guy. Oh, hi, Mark, whoever Mark was. Then the one I think that follows that one, if I'm not mistaken, the 8th entry would have been Puppet Master Legacy. And I think at this point, Full Moon, I don't know if it had gone under or if it was it hit a wall somewhere because this was released under Shadow Entertainment, I think is what it was called. And I was surprised, but I was like, Puppet Master Legacy, and who the fuck is Shadow Entertainment? So I was confused by it at the time because I didn't understand all the legal nonsense mumbo jumbo. But this was essentially a clip show. That's essentially what they did. Is they said, what if we did a Puppet Master movie where we had the best bits of all the Puppet Master movies, but we also have something happening in present day. So it's essentially a room episode where they just have two people sitting in a room talking, and they're trying to connect the dots through all the movies. You see, so it was an interesting way to try and tie them all together, try to help you make sense of it all. Like, well, why is this? Why is that? So I give that one a lot of credit because not only are you getting the best of all the movies, but you're also getting this very arbitrary way of trying to connect the dots. And in some ways, you're just a little like, okay, I guess I can see that. The one element to that I didn't like is when they explained what happened to Rick, which was the puppet master from 4 and 5, is that he was found out and pretty much killed. Yeah. So it was just like, well, shit, just kind of sucks because he was a good dude and he was their, like, outside of Toulon, my favorite puppet master. Yeah. Obviously.
Yeah, I feel like he could have definitely done. I feel like they would have had a good story with him, especially if they did something, like more Nazis chasing him down the same way they did Toulon. Basically, Toulon passed the torch to him, in a sense. They could have had very good movies following that, but, they didn't go that route because...
Which
reasons, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense simply because, and this is where I get really frustrated about it, because now if you're trying to save money, okay, you feel like the easiest way to do that would be to maintain a story in present day. Yeah. Therefore, you're not having to do flashback material with the things that you have, your setup, your cars, your backgrounds, buildings, whatever. And for some reason after that film, and if I'm missing any, I apologize, so someone can just like at me and be like, hey, what about this? But from Legacy, that's when we get into the Axis trilogy. Now, this is where they tried to retrofit another story within the timeline of part 3, or at least after the fact. Somewhere within part 3 is when all this is supposed to happen. Or at least that's my understanding. And from there, it's like the story. So we're still back in Nazi Germany. Yeah. Which, again, if this is after part 3, that doesn't add up because he took the puppets with him. So if this is during part 3, or at least within that same time frame, there's a lot of extra stuff going on that we were unfamiliar with that doesn't seem to add up to what we were originally known to know. Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like it complicates something that doesn't need to be overly complicated. And again, you've kind of chopped all these entries into like a trilogy, trying to tell this big story that doesn't necessarily land properly. And this is the other beef that I have with it, is this is where we get a new set of puppets. And when I mean new set of puppets, I mean the puppets themselves are designed by someone new. Yeah. And they just don't look the same, Yeah. They don't have the essence of the other puppets. There's just something about them, like you can tell they are off. They just don't look right. Blade especially is the one that bothers me the most, because he's always been my favorite, and he looks like his head and shoulders, like he has no neck, and his face is glued shut. Yeah. Like he has no expressions anymore. And I was so disappointed in it because I love this franchise, and they do the artwork, and the artwork looks amazing. And you're like, yeah, I'm ready for it. And then you watch the movies and the puppets just look like a downgrade. Like we've just continued to go down in quality, and even the movies are just a little hard to watch, like they drag. Like
Yeah.
they tried to expand these movies into these 90-minute films, and they don't work in 90-minute portions. They need
Yeah.
to be trimmed, you know? So that kind of bothered me. I even tried watching Blade, the Iron Cross. I don't think you watched that with me.
No, I don't think I did.
And it was really just, I don't know. I just could not get into it. And it really disappointed me. And that's why I'm not really looking forward to, like, I know Dr. Death came out. I think they did a spinoff for him. And then, like I said, the Leech Woman spinoff. There's a lot of those I don't have a lot of interest in. I know that Baby Oopsie Daisy from Demonic Toys had a spinoff and is up to part 3 now, from my understanding. And I don't know, even that, like the original Baby Oopsie Daisy design, I loved, because it looked like one of these old baby dolls, but just had a sinister look to it, you know?
Yeah.
And it was so perfectly designed. Now it just looks bizarre and just not what I was kind of expecting. Even in Demonic Toys 2, I think it was, it's like it was a similar take, but they, I don't know, just kind of made it a little bit more demented looking. So it kind of looked cool, but just a little like, not very much in the same way, you know. But Baby Oopsie Daisy and Dom Everett's Demonic Toys, all-time favorite, hands down for me, for that version, because that was just like perfection. But yeah, I mean, as far as those movies go, I still love the franchise and I want it to succeed. But when other people seem to get their hands on it, that's where we seem to falter, because we're going to talk about this, because this is another film that we watched hoping for one thing, and we got completely blindsided. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I was really disappointed by the end of it. And that was Puppet Master, the Third Reich, or the Littlest Reich. Excuse me. I was going to say the Third Reich. No, we already had that. No, the Littlest Reich, which was so I can't remember the production company that was behind this, but they were given the rights to make their own Puppet Master movie with the explicit direction that you can do it however you want, because this will still remain, and then you can do it your way. And I did not like their take. So I want you to speak to this initially, because I've got some words too.
So when we went into this movie, I was so excited, because it had been quite some time before, we had seen a new Puppet Master movie and everything. So I was excited to see all of my favorite puppets come back. And we start, watching this movie and all that crap. And it was one of those where, like you kind of said, like it hit us off guard. And we were like, what the fuck? Why is that happening? Why are they doing that? And it got to the point where I just had to completely check out, because I knew there was no way in hell I was going to watch this fucking movie all the way through. Because, like I have said since the beginning of this podcast, the thing that makes me love Toulon's puppets is that they are not evil. They are used for evil, but they are not evil. Another thing that makes them so unique is that they have their own personalities. They are each literally their own person, and there is only a literal handful of them.
And they are one.
Yes, they are one of a kind. None of them are like the other. You have Jester, you have Blade, you have Torch, you have Pinhead, you have Tunneler, you have Leech Woman, you have Six Shooter, and Dr. Death. Is that the other one?
Dr. Death, Decapitron.
Well.
And.
Yeah.
That's all the main.
Like, those are the main ones. But even outside of, like, Dr. Death and Decapitron, the other ones are still, like, kind of your main group. Especially Blade, Jester, Pinhead, and Tunneler, and Six Shooter. Those 5 are kind of like your main puppets. And I don't remember them having a Jester in this movie.
I don't think they did.
No. They had multiple Blades, multiple Pinheads. They introduced new ones.
Yeah.
And it's not even just that's the problem. The biggest problem is that they took them and they made them senseless killers.
Yeah.
100%. It was 50 tiny Jasons or Chuckies running around. And as far as I can remember, in any of the others, I don't even think there were any actual children other than in the third one, which he technically didn't have anything to do with Toulon and the puppets until he kind of stumbled across, Toulon and everything. But they've never gone out of their way to hurt somebody, especially a child. And in this new movie, it's the creators just went, we're going to make them like Jason or Michael or Freddy or any of the other fucking...
But even those killers have not really killed children, with the exception of maybe Michael.
Yeah, and he only killed a child in the newer one.
Yeah.
But still, they made him he was... like the other ones, going on a mass murdering spree. And that's literally what they made these puppets do. It was just utter fucking chaos, mass murder. And the worst scene, I didn't even watch. Steven had to watch it. And I told him he couldn't even explain it past a certain point, which was a scene with a pregnant woman who was very pregnant. And one of the dolls climbed up inside of her and then busted out through her stomach holding the baby. And
it was just it was an incredibly cruel, mean-spirited scene.
Yes.
There was no reason. We've had this discussion. I know I probably mentioned it here and with Katrina. Kids dying in movies. I will accept such a thing if it serves a purpose. If you're just doing it for shock value, kiss my ass. There's no reason for it. Okay, but if it serves a purpose to the story, Jaws, when Alex Kintner dies, it served a purpose because everyone was trying to ignore the problem, and it took the death of a child for people to be like, okay, maybe we should pay attention. Even though they didn't quite try to pay attention, it was like the push that Chief Brody needed to be like, God damn it, what did I say? And you didn't listen. And still they didn't, but it was just like, for fuck's sake, what else do we need to do? It raised a red flag. Yeah,
it was kind of like the first domino got tipped over.
Yeah. So it served a purpose. Here, this was just absolutely just for shock value. You just you want to see the cruelest thing that we can come up with? Well, here you go. And it served no purpose of the story other than just to make a cruel, mean-spirited scene where you killed an unborn child.
Yeah.
And
it literally made me think of the new Chucky movie. The one where he's a robot. It made me think of that kind of I guess that kind of battle sequence almost, when you finally see all the puppets and they're coming in and everything just really hits the fan.
Yeah.
Type shit. It literally made me think of that. It almost seemed, which I don't remember which came first, but one of them rehashed it.
Probably been the Littlest Reich first.
Okay, then Chucky rehashed it.
Sure.
But I don't know. I don't even remember a lot about the movie because it wasn't even, I don't think it was a whole 20 minutes into the fucking movie before I was just like, nope, this is bullshit. It pissed me off. They literally made Toulon out to be a fucking Nazi.
He was a Nazi, yeah.
And that was the second biggest problem outside of the bastardized version of the puppets that we got, is they took a man who in all other contexts was a Jewish survivor. He survived the Holocaust. He couldn't save his wife. He couldn't save his friends, but he was able to, put them in these puppets and save them in a sense. He still had his family with him in a sense. And in this one, they literally made him the bad guy from the fucking start.
Yeah.
And it just made me so angry that they took somebody like Toulon and just warped him into this horrible fucking person.
Yeah. And there are aspects of it that I thought would have been interesting to explore when it was presented as such. But I don't know, the execution overall is just it didn't land. And we go back to the Puppet Master 2 problem where it just feels so out of character. Now, granted, this is a what if scenario. You can say multiverse. This is like what if he was a Nazi. Fair. But it just feels like if you are a fan of this series, it felt like a slap in the face because you're taking away all the elements that we loved and enjoyed from the original.
Yeah.
And you're twisting it in the worst possible way to make everything that we loved invalid.
Yeah.
So what do we have to go now? If you've never watched them, this may be up your alley. You may find it, and then you may not like the full moon versions. But for diehard fans, I'd love to meet one diehard fan of the original series who watched this and was like, "I love it," because I can't wrap my head around it.
I feel like that is one thing that just made Toulon somebody not only you could root for because he had been an underdog from fucking day one. And then, of course, being Jewish and going through the Holocaust and everything else, like, you just felt bad for him and everything. And I feel like the new movie just basically takes that entire story of a survivor and a hero and just gave it like the biggest fucking middle finger. They did not do a single fucking thing to pay homage to the original storyline or the original creators. They took it, they ran with it, and they made an absolutely atrocious movie that was supposed to be for fans and from fans type thing, you know? They seemed like they wanted to pay homage to the originals. Like it meant something to them. But it obviously didn't mean enough if you have to take somebody as pure in fucking heart as Andre Toulon and make him a fucking Nazi.
Yeah.
Like to me, that tells me you didn't have any better story. You literally just created all these other fucking tropes. He is Dr. Frankenstein and he has created his fucking monsters.
Yeah.
It is every other horrible trope in all these other horror movies where Puppet Master did something completely different and you completely fucked it over.
Yeah, went right back to the well and did the same thing everybody else has done. So, yeah, no, I can 100% agree with that. In fact, that's actually one of my rules with remakes, and I feel like that's where I've landed with remakes is if you're going to remake something, make it your own. Now, granted, when I say make it your own, you have to find a way to tell that story in a better way than the originals or in some ways on par.
Which there's so many ways they could have.
Exactly. And you have to maintain that essence of what made it good. By flipping everything on its head, you're, like you said, you're missing what made the original so good. So you're taking away that element. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you've completely stripped it of everything that it was. And I feel like that's where that flounders, where, and I'll give them credit for at least trying to be original. But as you pointed out, they used ancient relics of storytelling to rehash something in a very unoriginal way. So it doesn't land for especially fans.
And it's one of those things because obviously other creators have done this with other things. But it's just so vastly different, I think, is what makes it so bad. Because while I can agree, go out and do your own thing. We're going to go to a whole nother franchise, Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo is one of my absolute fucking favorite franchises from the original. Few hit and misses there in between, all the way up to the Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. When they came out with Velma. I was excited, was I not, for Velma. I was so excited. I did not care that they changed the ethnicity of any of the characters, as long as they were like the characters. And I knew Scooby-Doo wasn't going to be in it, so I prepared myself for it. But outside of Scooby-Doo, they made Velma just this raging fucking bitch, which she wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Daphne, even outside of the fact that, you know, she was rich in every other adaptation of Scooby-Doo, she wasn't rich in this one. She was a foster kid or was adopted or whatever. And she, you know, came off bitchy, which is fine for Daphne.
Mm-hmm.
But you took one of the things that made Daphne Daphne. She was like that because she was filthy fucking rich.
Yeah.
You would expect her to be humble from the origins that they gave her in Velma. Fred, I probably had the biggest fucking problem with. Because while I understand a lot of people don't like Fred from the original Scooby-Doo because he is kind of like that chauvinistic type person. But one, you have to look at when Scooby-Doo came out.
Sure.
Like, it's been around since my dad was a fucking kid.
Mm-hmm.
But Fred also kind of comes off like that knight in shining armor. And that is one of the things that I always loved about him because he was dopey. He fucked up. He would screw up all the freaking time. But his heart was always in a good place and he did his best to protect his friends.
Mm.
And in Velma, they just made him this whiny little, I don't even want to call him a wimp because I feel like that's not nice, but just this whiny shell of a version of himself.
Sure.
And then fucking Shaggy isn't even called Shaggy. They just refer to him as his name, as Norval, and he's not a pot smoker. And every goddamn person on the face of the planet that knows Scooby-Doo knows that Shaggy and Scooby fucking smoke pots.
Well, I mean, they did with Velma what they did in Puppet Master. They
Exactly.
subverted everything you knew and said, well, this is what it's going to be now. It's like, yeah, but that
You took everything from each character that made that character likable and lovable and you bastardized it,
Yeah, you
which is
didn't-
the exact fucking thing they did in Puppet Master.
which is not what you should do with your characters.
No, if you want to make something for the fans because you think this is what the fans want, they want more adult type content with these characters that they grew up with, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? We got adult type content when the first Scooby-Doo live action movie came out.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it was...
hell, you could go back to Scooby-Doo Zombie Island. That's where Fred and Daphne really, you know, have their flirtatious banter and everything else. We've had adult content. There's always been adult themes throughout Scooby-Doo and stuff like that. You didn't have to make them such horrible fucking people.
Yeah.
And it goes the same with the Puppet Master. You made each one of those puppets who were good people when they were alive into who would only guess would be more Nazis.
I wouldn't even say that. I think they're just mindless automatons at this point, just going around killing.
And I honestly believe that's one of the reasons why they didn't put Jester in there.
Probably. Because was probably the most animated and vocal as far as personality goes.
But he's also, exactly, with his personality, he's the little lovable one.
Yeah.
Like
cheerleader, that's what you said before.
Yeah. He's definitely a cheerleader. Like, he doesn't really fight. He's gotten to scraps before.
Hmm.
He's attacked people before, but he doesn't go out of his way like the other ones do to fight.
Yeah.
But he's always there. He's always there to help him or to warn him or something else. And I don't feel like you could have had a Jester in the new one because he would have been so fucking out of place with the other puppets. Like, he just would not have fit.
Yeah, no. I agree. So, as you can tell, we don't like The Littlest Reich. And
it can suck a massive dick.
now, what I would like to see, and I don't know if this will ever happen, but I would love if the right person would come around and try to also acquire the rights to remake Puppet Master with a budget and see what they could do and really take a lot of the ideas that have been done up to this point and maybe try to craft something a little bit more cohesive with the story, as opposed to, like where we get snippets here, snippets there, and then you're just like, all right, well, I'm kind of painting a picture based on what you were trying to do, but there are inconsistencies because of you didn't know where you wanted to go. So now that you have this, you can be like, okay, well, here's what the actual story is, and really paint a broad picture in a more cohesive way. And I don't know who that would be. Like as far as filmmakers or whatnot, obviously I'd want a director who has a passion for the original series.
Yes.
And as far as production company that could back it, Legendary Pictures, to my understanding. And I don't really know what's happened to this film, and it didn't occur to me until just the other day that we have not heard anything about this. But there is a Toxic Avenger remake that has been filmed, and it has apparently been done for a year. That was produced by Legendary, and it's not seen the light of day. Or we haven't seen a trailer, we haven't seen anything or heard anything, but it's got names. I mean, it's got Kevin Bacon, Elijah Wood,
the Baconator,
Peter Dinklage.
Oh.
So you've got names behind it, or in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what's happened to it. So I'm not trying to think that there's something bad or wrong with it. I'm hoping that maybe because again, they probably shot during or in and around COVID, so that probably caused a bit of a problem here and there. So understandable, there could be delays, because especially when you think about a year and a half, COVID. But I mean, they secured that. They've made it happen. I can't wait to see what the end product is. Hopefully it's good. Yeah. But same with this. I mean, if you got the right backers, this doesn't have to be a super massive budget. You know what I'm saying? I think you could get away with a very modest budget. I would love to see them bring in stop motion.
Yes.
Bring that back.
I feel like it needs to be like no CGI unless you're wanting to do anything special with, like lightning or some shit.
Well, no, even with the CG, think about that. I mean, you get some like kind of what they do with Chucky. You get the animatronic puppets, you get them wired up, and you just green screen that shit out, and you just wipe it clean. And that way you can actually get to see them move from a distance. And if they're walking, then you can do the stop motion. But yeah, I'd love to see something like that. I mean, combine a lot of these crafts and see if you can make something wholly unique that pays homage while still telling a compelling story, because there's a great story there that can be told.
Yeah, that's one of the things I would love for them to go all the way back to the very first time Toulon made one of his puppets. The very first one. Build up from there until, you kind of get to basically redo the entire... Stick with the original story of Toulon, like his backstory, him being Jewish, him surviving, all that. But do it to where it's a coherent and consistent storyline across the different movies. Or if they could make it into a TV show, that'd probably be even fucking better, because then you can have plenty more episodes to suss out everything. Because I would like to see... basically the faces behind the puppets, who they were before they died, and he put them in there, because the only one we know for a fact is Leech Woman, because we see it happen.
That's true.
But go all the way up until Toulon kills himself. You could stick with it, or you could have him hunt him down. I prefer him killing himself, because obviously if they find him, it's torture and everything else. So him taking his own life, I feel like, is still a good storyline for him. But then introduce a new puppet master. You could have good ones, you could have evil ones. You could see the puppets have to, like in the second movie type thing, see them being torn, from either side. Or have them... Good Lord, this is a good idea. Have them to where somebody gets the hold of half of the puppets. Like, so half of them go with a bad person and half of them are still with the good puppet master. And then they have to go up against each other. So,
and that would actually pose a good question, because what is it specifically that defines the puppet master? Is it just the one who brings them back to life?
I think it is. I think it's the one that brings them back to life. And I feel like Because that would be interesting to see if the puppets would go up against each other, if they were pitted against each other. But you could even do it to where somebody steals the information of how to make puppets and then kills people and makes their own puppets.
I mean,
so you have Toulon's puppets versus, the evil puppet master's puppets.
Yeah.
But it seems to be, at least from what we've seen, it seems to be whoever wakes them up, whoever gives them the serum. And that goes back to basically that puppet master holds their lives in his hand. You stop giving them the serum, you destroy the serum, they die.
And see, and that's why I wouldn't mind kind of I won't say complete remake of the original, but something in that line where you find a way that you see a good side of them, but then you also see them doing bad. So if you're new to the Puppet Master franchise, you might be confused at first. It's like, well, why were they doing good here and now they're doing bad? And then when you finally come to the reveal of who's been behind all this, then you're like, oh shit, so this guy was doing this. Cut out all that psychic bullshit, because I mean, that was one element that I do not feel was necessary to that plot. I feel like that was just some way for them to have supernatural elements that they could just sense that something was going on. Forego all that. They don't need that. That doesn't help the plot one bit. Just make it a bunch of people who were friends of this guy, but maybe go down some, deep rabbit holes. Maybe he knows some secrets about him and he's trying to blackmail them for all this shit. And that's why he got them all there. And I don't know, just there's a story there. I'm spitballing here, but yeah, remove all that psychic nonsense.
One thing I would definitely like, because I feel like this would explain a lot about the puppets, even though they've never explained it, as far as, again, we know if they don't get their serum, then they quote unquote kind of die, or at least they stop functioning.
Think of it like, I've always taken it like gas. Like you're powering them up, and if they burn out, then...
Well, see, and that's one of the things that I feel like if they remade it, that they could kind of flush something out, because I thought it would be a really cool idea if they have, kind of a piece of a soul in them and all that kind of stuff. You think of it that serum is just animating their body. So if their body's not animated, you're basically trapped in a prison, like a mind prison. So you're going to be conscious. You're in a body you can't move.
Yeah.
So like seeing things that, they've seen and stuff like that, because you could even do where people have gotten them and made them marionettes because they didn't know the truth behind the puppets. You could literally do like an entire season of everything that the puppets witnessed while they weren't actively walking around doing things.
Right.
And it would still be interesting, because you could also feel like that. I almost feel like they would have resentment towards Toulon at some point if they are conscious inside of these bodies and they are literally trapped in there for the rest of forever.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like at some point you would resent the person that put you in there. Like,
Sure.
Yes, you got your revenge, but you got your revenge over like fucking 100 years ago.
And you have no way to communicate with anybody.
Exactly.
You're immortal, but
yeah.
For what?
And especially if you take the aspect of if their subconscious or their consciousness is trapped in those dolls, even when they're not active, they're still awake, and you're just permanently awake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're literally trapped with your own fucking thoughts and can't do anything about it until some schmuck comes along and injects you with a green serum.
Yeah.
It would give, and see, if the new Puppet Master movie had done that, make them to where they hated humankind because of what Toulon did to them.
Sure.
Or it drove them insane to the point that they just started killing people. That would have been so much better story than what they did. They didn't even have to fucking bring in Toulon. He still could have been who he originally was, and his puppets just finally lost it because they've been trapped in these bodies for decades.
Sure.
That would have been awesome, but they didn't do it.
No, they didn't. So, I really don't have much more to say about Puppet Master. I guess my hope and wish, but I don't think it's going to happen, is I'd love to see the series kind of go back to basics. The spin-off stuff that Charles Band's doing right now, it's not exciting me like it used to. I'm sure that there are tons of people out there who are digging it, but it's not giving me the vibes I want. I want to see the team together. I don't want to see solo adventures.
Exactly.
That's always been the joy of Puppet Master, is seeing the team together.
Yeah, and I like Leech Woman to a point, but she is not even in like the top 3.
No, she's just always been one of the, like, it was an interesting concept when you came up with these puppets and you needed some weird shit to go with, but
yeah,
there's a reason she supposedly died in part 2. She did.
Well, I mean, like, you think about it, all the rest of them can move really fast. They can attack you really fast. Hers, she sits there and gags on a fucking leech for like 5 minutes before it plops out on you.
Yeah.
And then you could literally just pull that bitch off.
Sure.
Like, both the doll and the leech. Like,
but the whole purpose is they've got to hold you down. It's like, go, you do your thing now. We could have gutted him already, but you go ahead and throw your leeches on there. That's fine.
And see, that's the other thing. The only one that should be actually strong enough to hold anybody down would be Pinhead.
Yeah. So, anyway, if you've got nothing else, I got nothing else.
I don't have anything else to say other than if you have not watched the original first 5 Puppet Masters, I still think you could do without 2. Just watch 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Go watch them. They're really good movies. If you are a Puppet Master fan, I would hope that you already know of Full Moon Direct, but if not, go on Full Moon Direct. That is their website where they sell everything from posters to movies to action figures to replicas of the dolls. However, right now they are not selling any more replicas of the Puppet Master dolls because I think they got a new designer. So the dolls that they originally had on, which my amazing husband bought me the Jester, and he sits on my dresser, and I love him. But I know that they sold out of the original replicas that they had, but as far as I know from what I have seen, they are going to be coming out with new replicas that they are going to be putting on the site. Yes, they are kind of expensive, but they're honestly not expensive as a lot of other replicas that are out there.
No,
they are reasonably priced for what you're getting, and they are the size of how the dolls appear in the movies. And they come with their own little stand and everything from their outfit to just, as far as like the older ones, which I'm sure the newer ones are going to be even better. At least I would hope.
I would hope if you're getting a new designer.
Yeah.
I mean, shit.
But everything from their outfits to the, facial features and everything else are just absolutely amazing. They look like the real dolls. They just don't move.
Sure. And I mean, even for being a replica that is as close as you can get, it's still pretty impressive. I mean, it might not be 100% the same, but it's impressive.
Oh yeah.
And I'm hoping whoever they get to replace the designer, if you're doing a swap like that, they better have impressive credentials to design dolls that look like you couldn't tell them apart.
Yeah.
Like that kind of quality.
But I mean, yeah, just check it out. If you're a fan and you're not on any type of fan pages, there is a Puppet Master fan page on Facebook, which I'm a part of, and you can see all kinds of stuff relating to Puppet Master on top of people who actually create their own puppets, as well as like Toulon's trunk and stuff like that. People have done absolutely amazing things. They share their collection of their replicas and everything that they got. And it's a really good group, and nobody's like hateful or anything. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Just check out Puppet Master. It's really good, especially if you like kind of that stop motion type stuff. Although I'm sure it's related or it's considered horror movie or a horror movie, it's literally something you could probably watch with some of your children. Not young children, but it's nowhere near as bad as most of the horror movies that are out there.
4 and 5 especially, I would say, are a lot more family friendly in
Yeah.
essence. Again, there's some, even the gore in those is not that bad. I mean, I wouldn't even say that it's that vicious. There's some blood splatter here and there, but it's nothing that's like, oh my God, it's gross. It's just, so, I mean, it's some very tame.
It's about
it
on
should
par
be-
with Megan.
Yeah, it'd be PG-13 level, in my opinion. Yeah, those would easily be an introductory R for your tween kids. I'd say I wouldn't go too far beyond that. But
Yeah, I'd say around, like, I say that 12, 13, that's usually when a lot of kids start getting into those types of movies and stuff. And there are kids who are much younger who are into horror movies.
Yeah. And
But-
if they've watched worse things like
Yeah.
Saw or whatever, then
If your child has seen Jason, your child can watch the Puppet Master movies with no problem.
now, if you've got a problem with boobs, you might want to avoid the first 3, and there might be more after that. 4, like I said, 4 and 5 are fairly tame. They're PG-13, if anything. I don't even think there's any nudity in those films that I can remember.
Well, if
So,
anything, if you got kids and you want to show it to them, at least show them 4 and 5. But other than that, go out, watch it, show your love for it. So hopefully one day we'll get a good movie
remake.
or a good remake.
Yeah.
Whether it is TV or movie. I don't care
Just to
which.
keep it alive. That's all we're asking for right now,
Yes.
because it feels like I appreciate what Charles Band is doing, but he's not putting his best foot forward right now, in my opinion. Love you, man, but I feel like you're cutting it on the cheap, and I understand times are tough. Anyway, Ramblers, let us know how you feel about Puppet Master on Twitter at Horror Ramblings, and if you've got more to say and a tweet's just not going to cut it, you can send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com. And if you want to discuss horror with like-minded individuals, join our Facebook group, and or even join us in our Ramblers room on Discord. Either way, there's people talking about horror topics. We like to drop in some trivia every now and again on Facebook, so why not just join us over there? And if you can find us on Instagram, you can see an assortment of horror images that are usually based around whatever we're posting that week, so I'll try to pop up a few Puppet Master images for today. If you're feeling generous and want to support the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/pencil and paper productions, and it'll help the show grow. You can also leave a review on your favorite podcasting app. Right now, I got to give it a shout out to Good Pods, whom I've maybe disparaged in the past because it was a joke. I was just ribbing on Good Pods because I didn't know who they were, and suddenly they're treating our show like it's gold. So, they are recommending us to people. So I appreciate them over there at Good Pods. So go hit a like over on Good Pods. Just go through every episode and just be like 5 stars. It helps the show grow. If you want to, you can also go on Spotify and answer our questions and polls. Let us know what you think. And finally, if you want a central hub with any and all things, you can go to pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience. And remember, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.